Hey there friends, what's going on? It's Kodiak here, back for my very first Outriders build guide video, and we had a lot of questions on our Legacy After Dark stream about my Trickster. Now, I will admit right off the bat that I am not the best Trickster in the world, but I do know a few things that can guide newer players on their path to completing the game, reaching expeditions, pushing deep into expeditions. Now, I know there's some metas going around, but I wanted to do something slightly different, focus on a build that's a little bit more forgiving. The meta build, which is an automatic shotgun build, has a very high skill ceiling, and I think there's another build out there that is more accessible to beginning players, maybe middle-of-the-road players, and even some upper-edge players. So this build is technically an LMG or double gun build, and what we're basically going to be doing is tapping into twisted rounds. I know everybody's doing twisted rounds builds, but that's just the way it is right now, and until a balance pass happens, we have to lean into what's actually working in the game. Now, the reason we're leaning into LMGs or double guns is because we want a lot of bullets, we want to do a decent amount of damage, and we want this to be pretty foolproof. And I found that the LMGs and double guns do a really good job of being forgiving. That's really the key here. This is a forgiving build for newer players that may struggle in expeditions. And I want to be clear, guys, this build will take you all the way to around Expedition Challenge Tier 10. That's where I started to find that this build was just not cutting it. And there's a few reasons why. The build focuses on sustained damage, not necessarily outputting a lot of damage, but sustained damage. You're still going to be able to kill things, that's great, but once you reach those higher challenge tiers, this build just doesn't do enough damage. And you can lean heavier into the damage side of things, but what you're going to be missing out on is survivability. So there's a really fine line between how much damage you do and how much survivability you have, and I found that this build is a nice middle ground between those two ideas that is very, again, forgiving to new players. Now, as you guys can see here, I am using a standard variant double gun. I love the double guns. I like the back and forth of the recoil, the left and right. I just find it to be a little bit more easy to manage than an LMG, and I just like the idea of double guns. Not quite as beefy as an LMG, but still just as viable, and a little bit more hefty than an assault rifle. Now, the key here is that Tier 2 mod Perpetuum Mobile. You instantly replenish your magazine if you kill an enemy with 35% or less ammo remaining in your magazine. Now, we're using a larger magazine gun, again, the double gun or the LMG, because it has a bigger clip size. The more ammo you have, the easier it is to reach that threshold of 35%. So the key here is that you have to be killing minions. And even in the story and expeditions, there are always going to be targets that you can kill. The only thing you're going to have a problem with is if you run into a boss and there's nothing else to kill, you're pretty much not going to be able to replenish your mag, thus losing the twisted rounds. But we'll get there. The other mod I have on here is Killing Spree, and as you can tell by that wrench icon, I actually was able to manipulate that mod because Perpetuum Mobile was already on the double gun. Now, Killing Spree is a great way to boost your damage. Killing shots increase your damage by 25% for this weapon for 20 seconds. That bonus deteriorates with time and stacks up to 3 kills. So that's a really good bonus. That's the mod from the Amber Vault that I pulled off the Amber Vault and put on here. There are other options for mods here, but we'll talk about those a little bit later in the video. Now, the only other thing we have to talk about here looking at this screen is the attributes, and the one I really want to focus on is close range damage. This build is designed to get you very close to your enemies, and that's where you're going to be unleashing on them. So anything that rolls with close range damage is what you're interested in. This unfortunately rolled with long range damage. That's not very helpful in most cases, and weapon life leech is good. It's going to help you sustain on the battlefield, but not necessarily essential. Now, before we get into the armor pieces and those mods, I want to talk about our skills that we're going to be using. As you can see here, I'm actually using an interesting combination of Venator's Knife, Hunt the Prey, and Twisted Rounds. The reason I'm using Venator's Knife and Hunt the Prey is because they both have very low cooldowns, and they're both deception or movement abilities, and we're going to tap into that once we get to the skill tree. Venator's Knife is great. You're going to throw that knife at an enemy, it's going to ricochet to a maximum of 5 enemies, they're going to slow down, they're going to take some damage, and they're going to be marked, which means the first damage that you deal to them is going to be doubled. That is a really good ability. It's a sleeper ability. I think a lot of endgame tricksters are starting to realize how good it is. You don't need the other ones. You can check the other ones out if you want to, maybe Slow Trap or Temporal Blades, but Venator's Knife is very viable. Now, Hunt the Prey is our mobility. This is going to allow us to move very quickly around a battlefield. The faster you're moving around a battlefield, the more you're able to avoid enemy damage. If you're sitting in the middle of the battlefield trying to run at enemies, you're just going to take damage, and Hunt the Prey is, as far as I know, the best way to avoid that. Sure, you could take Borrowed Time, that's going to give you a nice beefy shield, but I would rather avoid that damage entirely than have to mitigate it using a shield, which may crack if I don't reach the enemy fast enough. Now, the final ability, the thing with which the entire build is based around, is Twisted Rounds, and these are just too good to pass up. You're going to fill your current magazine with anomaly-infused bullets, increasing your firepower, and this is going to last until you reload or switch weapons, and that's really the key here. Remember, we have that Perpetua Mobile on our double gun, which is going to replenish our magazine, and that's basically going to allow us to sustain that Twisted Rounds indefinitely. Of course, not always indefinitely if you don't manage to kill an enemy. You have to kill enemies for that magazine to refresh, and you have to be below that threshold of 35%. So in terms of the other pieces of gear, the armor, if you will, you can tell that we're leaning very hard into Twisted Rounds. Twisted Fate gives me an additional 30% critical damage when Twisted Rounds is active, and Strong Twist increases the firepower by an additional 15%. Very straightforward, clearly designed for damage output. On my chest piece here, as you can tell, I'm using Personal Space. This is going to grant me 15% bonus to close range weapon damage. Again, we're leaning heavy into that close range damage. You can even see that on the piece of gear here that the attribute rolled with close range damage, so we're leaning heavy on that. Hunt to Prey is going to put us right behind targets, so we basically want to tap into that by doing all of the damage in close range. As you can tell, the other mod here is Damage Absorber. This is a nice utility, increasing my armor by X amount and resistance by 10%. Really solid tier 2 mod, and if you're looking for utility like this one rolled with Damage Absorber on it, I was okay with that. Now the next piece of gear is where we start to get a little strange. As you can tell, we have another Twisted Rounds ability on here that's basically going to give me 2 full magazines of Twisted Rounds. Now the idea is that you never run out of Twisted Rounds, but if you do, you have additional magazine as a backup. That's going to give you that second magazine of Twisted Rounds, and that's going to allow you to maybe take out that boss or an elite enemy that you didn't get the refresh on. Now the other mod here is a tier 2 Vein Ripper. This kind of leans into my challenge tier 10 plus build, but I think it works just as well. Critical shots inflict bleed on enemies, and the reason we have this is because on our boots, we have Bloody Boost, which is giving us a damage increase of 15% for any enemies afflicted with bleed. So we're hitting those crits because we're firing so many rounds at them. We're also getting a damage boost because they're afflicted with bleed. So it kind of works hand in hand for an overall damage increase. Now on these gloves here, these are fantastic gloves for anybody really because you're getting Captain Hunter, increasing your damage against elites by 25%. I already mentioned that this build has a slight problem with damage at the end game, so I think Captain Hunter is a fantastic choice here. You can also see that I'm using Crit Stack. Critical shots build up 5-second stacking effects that grant me anomaly power and firepower, and this stacks up to 5 times. So I'm leaning heavy into doing more damage, but you could lean into surviving more if you want. I like going with a more glass cannon build. I like moving around the battlefield quickly and doing as much damage as I can. And like I said, I'm kind of at that edge of challenge tier 10 where this build is not working anymore. So I'd rather go more glass cannon and less survivability because the issue is damage, not surviving. Now, the one piece of gear we didn't really get to talk about was the Chronosuit foot gear. And as you can see, I've got Shield of the Fallen on it. That's a tier 3 mod that's already baked into this piece of gear. It's not optimized for this build. So let's talk about some of the other mods that we can use if you don't have the perfect loadout. Now, I really enjoy Blue Blood as well. This is going to give us an additional 10% weapon leech that's going to allow us to stay on the battlefield even longer. In terms of other tier 2 mods, I also like Bloodlust. This is going to give our killing shots an increase to firepower, and this stacks 3 times and deteriorates every 10 seconds. It's a really good damage output mod. I really do like that one a lot. If you really want to lean heavy into the ammo regeneration aspect of this build, you could go with Vampiric Mag. Because we're using Vein Ripper, this basically doubles down on that aspect of making sure that you never run out of ammo. I honestly don't feel it's necessary. With Perpetua Mobile, you really never run out of ammo as long as you're killing enemies, so this is kind of a safety net. Other mods like Phantom Dash are fantastic if you like to roll around a battlefield and you move a lot, which this build requires. You may want to use Phantom Dash, which allows you to pass through enemies. As a trickster, you just get caught in corners. It's just part of the deal. So using something like Phantom Dash may actually save you when your back's up against a wall. An interesting option is also Introvert, which increases the range at which enemies are considered to be in close range by 2 meters, basically widening the circle at which enemies are considered close to you, giving you that extra damage from all of the attributes and basically the way that the build is designed. Now, there is one tier 3 mod down here that we do not have unlocked. That's basically the same as the Technomancer tier 1 mod that gives us ammo back every time we kill an enemy. Really disappointed we don't have it yet, and really disappointed that's a tier 3 mod for the Trickster and a tier 1 mod for the Technomancer. But with that one mod, you can pretty much scrap half of this build and redesign it for pure damage. So once we get that mod, you really just honestly just look out for that mod. It's a tier 3 mod, which means it's going to be on a legendary, and that's going to completely change up this build and allow you to really lean heavy into doing damage, dealing crits, and potentially taking this build past challenge tier 10. So the final thing we really need to look at in terms of the build here is the talent tree. And of course, we're going to go through this quickly. We're talking about close range damage. Close range damage there. Armor piercing is decent. Weapon damage, again, close range damage. And our first major node here is Leap of Quietus. Activating a movement skill increases your armor piercing by 25%. So that's anytime I use Hunt the Prey, I'm getting armor piercing. Keep moving down the line, we've got crit damage, that's fantastic. We've got more close range damage, and then we've got 2 major nodes. Activating deception skills increase your weapon damage by 50%. Anytime I use Venator's Knife, I'm getting weapon damage. That's a win-win. Every time we use a movement skill, we're also getting weapon damage because of Outriders Execution. These two are absolutely essential for giving you that damage boost, and it's the reason why you need to be using Hunt the Prey and Venator's Knife as often as possible. We've also got Unforeseen End, and this is not a great node if you're playing solo. When attacking enemies from behind, all your weapon damage is increased by 20. Now that's nice when you use Hunt the Prey, but unless you're playing with a team, the chances of you being behind enemies are a lot less likely than if you were with a teammate. If you're with 1 or 2 other teammates, you're going to be behind enemies a lot more, and this is more valuable, but for solo players, it's really not. But unfortunately, as you can tell, we can't take anything else. We also have both of these next ones, which increase our weapon damage and increase our close range weapon damage, and this next one, which is another weapon damage. And here's where we get to the end of the line. Unforeseen End, again, not that valuable, but we've got Bounty Hunter, increasing our weapon damage against elites by 15%. That's huge. We've got Oddity Summation, increasing our mag size by 50%. That's just going to make it easier to replenish our mag. Increase to assault weapon damage. Of course, we're using an LMG or a double gun. And then finally, we've got Cold Calculation. For each enemy in close range, your weapon damage is increased by 8%. So as you can see, we're leaning very heavily into that close range damage. We're leaning heavily into replenishing our mag, doing a lot of damage, doing as much damage as we can as the build allows. So that is the build in theory, and in practice, it is incredibly fun to play. Like I mentioned, you're going to be moving around the battlefield a lot. You're going to be using Hunt the Prey, you're going to be throwing your Venator's Knife, and you're always going to want to be focusing on those enemies that you hit with Venator's Knife. You're going to do more damage to them, but if Venator's Knife, if that mark falls off, you're not going to get that damage boost. So as soon as you Hunt the Prey, then you're going to throw your knife, or maybe you go in with your knife, it really doesn't matter, but you're going to want to focus on those targets. Once you kill those targets, you want to focus on elites. If you have any sort of crit stack or damage buff rolling, that's when you want to switch to the elites, especially if you've got a fresh mag. If you've got a fresh mag, you want to focus on the elites, but here is where kind of the top tier players will shift their thinking. If you're about halfway through your mag and the elite is not dead yet, switch to a lesser minion, kill that minion, and replenish your mag. As long as you keep Perpetua Mobile rolling, you're going to be able to take out anything. Elites, brood mothers, anything. It's all about that Perpetua Mobile, keeping up your ammo. Now, there are going to be times where your ammo drops, and basically at that point, you're in survival mode. If you don't have Twisted Rounds activated, you have to be in survival mode. The thing is, when you don't have Twisted Rounds, you really don't have Weapon Life Leech activated, and you have no way of really replenishing your health, as well as no way to kill enemies. So it's pretty much flight mode at that point. Hiding in a corner, staying away from enemies, using your Venator's Knife to slow targets down. If you have allies, maybe double back and regroup with them. But once you get your Twisted Rounds back up, it's bloody hell, it's death and destruction. And honestly, guys, this is one of the most fun builds I have used in the game so far. I really love my Trickster, and I'm really trying to master the Trickster. I'm getting close to Challenge Tier 15. I know there are some great players out there, so I don't want to take anything away from them. This is just the build that works for me. It's going to work for you in progression, in the story. You can start building it on day 1. You can also use it on Challenge Tier 1 through 10 very effectively. So I think this is a great build for most players in the game. As long as you're not on the cutting edge of expeditions, you will find this build helpful. But as always, guys, if you have any questions, please leave your comments in the section below or consider joining us on Discord. We've got a great Outriders community forming. We've got 6,000 members in the Discord, so check out that link below. Join today and become part of the Legion. If you guys are Trickster mains and you want to help other people with your builds, please critique my build, let other people know what could work, what may not work, and let's get that discussion going in the comments. We here at Legacy Gaming are all about community. We're all about building each other up. So if you have ideas or you have suggestions, leave them in the comments and let's keep that ball rolling. Finally, guys, if you like our videos and you want more content like this in your feeds, let us know by hitting the thumbs up and, of course, subscribing to the channel. It's completely free for you, and it really does help us out a ton. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the build. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.